CBS Sports. Josh, I don't know if you watched SEC Network or NFL Network earlier today with Matt Corral going through his pro day workout. I am curious, though, kind of big picture. We've seen, Malik Willis at Liberty go through the 70-throw scripted pro day workout. We saw it with Matt Corral today. What are teams looking for? What are they trying to learn in this day where guys are in shorts and T-shirts? They know exactly what they're doing. They're in familiar surroundings. And let's face it, if you're going to be a potential first-round pick, you should be able to throw the football.
Yeah, you should be able to throw the football against air with zero rush whatsoever. In a pre-scripted throwing session nonetheless. Yeah, if you are not able to put your best foot forward in that kind of a setting, then teams are going to have a little bit of concern about what you might project to in the NFL. But generally speaking, I mean, there's not a lot of, overwhelmingly positive things that you can take from a pro day for explicitly what I just said. It's a situation where you have zero pass rush. You know what the route is before you take the snap from, the center, and there's just very little to take from it. So, when you're looking at Matt Corral specifically, I think teams wanted to see his ankle and how he was moving around. I thought he looked really good. He showed that great mobility that we had seen during his collegiate career. Didn't look like he was still feeling the effects of that ankle injury whatsoever. And Malik Willis, a lot of that was the same type of stuff. I mean, you wanted to see how he interacts with people, just his overall demeanor, talk to him in person, get a feel for who he is. And a lot of these teams that are in the quarterback market had already met with these guys previously at the NFL Combine. So
right.
It's also another way to touch base with them again, see how things are going, and, just checking another box in the pre-draft evaluation process.
Josh, why do you think most people have Matt Corral ranked behind Kenny Pickett, behind Malik Willis? Some people have got him maybe even fourth among the quarterbacks available. What is it that separates Corral from those other two, and is it going to finish that way?
Well, I think for me it's probably going to end up being Kenny Pickett is that top quarterback option. But when you're looking at these quarterbacks in this class, they're all very clustered to me. I think you can make a case for Pickett. I think you can make a case for Willis and his upside. I think you can make a case for Corral, who I had as the number one quarterback at one point in the process. And, to be honest, they all have their deficiencies. With Corral, he's a little bit more, undersized compared to some of these other guys. Pickett has his hand size. Malik Willis is just not as developed as a passer as some of these other quarterbacks. So, I mean, there's all stuff weighing against each of these prospects. So it's really going to be, what each team values. If you're valuing the mobility, then you're probably going to be drawn to a Malik Willis over some of these other guys who, are not completely limited, but are not at the same level as a Malik Willis. Whereas Matt Corral has shown improved decision-making. He gets the ball out quickly. So if you're looking at that kind of an offense, maybe that is going to be a better fit for what you're trying to do with your team. And then Kenny Pickett, I just thought, had the cleanest season this past year. He's older than some of these other quarterbacks, so you have to take that into consideration as well. But at the end of the day, I don't think there's a strong case to be made for any of these guys to be the first quarterback taken. I think it could be any one of them.
Josh, last thing on the quarterback piece of this. This has been an active offseason in the NFL. We've seen a lot of quarterback movement. I think more quarterback movement than we see in most off seasons. And there aren't a ton of openings right now. I mean, at the end of the year, you might have looked and said, okay, there's 7 teams that probably need to figure out something during the offseason. A lot of those teams have done that through free agency or trades or however they've gone about it. And so I guess the question is, I feel like even in a year when you don't have a quarterback class that is as strong or as heralded, teams still reach, right? They still value that first-round quarterback because it's a franchise player. Is this going to be the year where we don't see a team that reaches in the first round and maybe it's, into the mid-teens even before we see a quarterback taken? Or are we going to get what we always get where people get enamored with the quarterback and they go that route?
Yeah, I think we're going to get what we always get. I think the quarterback position is, it's just that important. And if you don't have one, then you're chasing one, and you've got to get that guy in the building. So it is interesting as we've looked at the quarterback movement this offseason, all the dominoes that have fallen to this point. And you've got Baker Mayfield, you've got Jimmy Garoppolo still out there looking for a starting situation. Maybe Seattle is that team. Carolina could be that team, both of which we could very well see in the draft market as well. But there's two different markets. There's the teams that might be looking for a guy that can start right now, which, might be more suitable for a Mayfield or a Garoppolo. And there's those teams that, maybe have somebody in place right now, but are still looking for that long-term option. And that's teams like Pittsburgh, Washington, back to Carolina, Seattle. They're still looking for those types of players as well. Maybe New Orleans. So, while there aren't as many teams that are in the mix for maybe a Mayfield or a Garoppolo, I still think there's a very robust market of teams that are probably looking for a guy that could develop into a long-term franchise quarterback for them. And, that's why we're going to see some of these guys, relatively speaking, overdrafted.
Feels like when we are in the first round, it's quarterbacks, number one. It's elite edge rushers that can go get the quarterback. It's off-the-charts athletic safeties. And then it's offensive tackles. And Charles Cross is one of those offensive tackles that I think we're going to see in the first round. Is there still a chance that he's the first tackle taken, or is it the guy from NC State and Evan Neal from Alabama that end up being first, and maybe he ends up being the third tackle off the board?
I think there's a chance, but I think it's probably slim at this point. For me, I have Evan Neal as my top offensive tackle, followed by Charles Cross, and then I have Ekwonu. So teams are going to have these guys rated very differently, and it could depend on what they're trying to accomplish. Evan Neal is probably a more balanced option, whereas Charles Cross is a more polished pass protector, and Ekwonu is a mauler in the ground game. So, if you're going to be more run-based, then maybe you're looking more towards his services. So it's really all about what these teams are looking for atop the draft. I personally would not be surprised if we're looking back in 5 years saying Charles Cross is the most talented offensive tackle to come from this class because he's the youngest. He still has time to develop. He's still got a lot of room to grow in his own game, and he's already a very fantastic player. So, projections for him are all over the board. Some people think he's going to go early 20s. Some people think he could go top 6. And part of that is going to be where those quarterbacks land, because Carolina is a team that obviously needs some offensive tackle help. But if they're going to be in the market for a quarterback, then suddenly you have to take them off the board as well. There's a lot to play out. I don't think Charles Cross is going to be the first offensive tackle taken, but I do think there's a slim chance, and I still think he could be the best when it's all said and done.
Josh, we were talking about Charles Cross earlier, and Giants and Jets both there, and both seem to have some interest, somebody that Charles Cross had talked to or admitted to having talked to a significant amount, both with 2 picks early. How likely is it that he's in New York with one of those 2 teams?
Well, just from an odds perspective, pretty good.
Yeah.
And it will depend on what happens in the picks prior to that. I've heard Ekwonu is a guy that the Jets really like, and he could be in the mix at number 4 overall, in which case they're probably not taking another at number 10 overall.
Sure.
The Giants, depending on what happens before them, because the Texans need an offensive tackle as well. So maybe they're going to be in the mix for one of these guys that we're talking about. But I think the Giants, if they do not get, and I assume there's not going to be an option in free agency that's going to change this, but I think they're probably going to take an offensive lineman with one of those 2 picks in the top 10. So, whether that's Cross or Ekwonu or Evan Neal, I don't really know.
Yeah.
But based on kind of how I'm thinking it's going to play out, I would not be surprised if both Neal and Ekwonu were gone, in which case if the Giants are dead set on taking an offensive tackle, then you're going to be looking at Charles Cross. Because I don't think that a Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa or a Bernard Raymond from Central Michigan are in the same ballpark as Charles Cross. So for me personally, I would be going in that direction. But if you talk to some people in the league, they like Penning and his, harnessed natural aggression that he has on the football field. So, this draft class, the reason that I'm kind of, hedging my bets so much is because I feel like there's about 5 blue chip guys in this class, and then you look at number 10 through number 40, and you're like, man,
there's a lot
this
of
guy could go number 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this guy could go number 12. He could go number 35 overall. It's all these projections are just across the board right now. Is all over the